And the motion is, so whatever the motion is, this house will invite the Prime Minister to speak for the motion as stands today. Here.
Where's my MIDP? Thank you, Mr. Chair. So we see that today, in this current problem that we are facing, is that the economy is at a very terrible state, which means that it's at a very high crisis level, that all these companies are failing. And also, the problem with labor unions is that these labor unions protect these labor workers from getting to protect them from being the most direct impacts from this economic crisis, right? It's because that even though there's the economic crisis, these labor workers at these labor unions still force these companies to still generate income for them. And this is why it's detrimental, because when these labor unions protect this income for these labor workers, right, this still makes the upkeep very high for these companies. And this is why financial crisis, right? Because our case here for today is we are going to disband until this economic crisis are over. Meaning to say that when it's over, then economy is back in good circulation, then we can generate more income, and then these labor unions can protect further these labor workers. But then in economic crisis, this is just being a burden to all these companies. And then we are also not harming the free market, because labor unions and these labor workers are not affiliated with the free market in any way. So the labor unions are not affected, so we are not harming in any way. So then clear with my case. Now I'm going to tell you about how we are going to give this mechanism a very big benefits toward the economy, right? So number one, about how we are going to create the most efficient workforce ever, because when these companies have given this when these companies have given the labor getting very complacent, meaning to say that these labor workers are just depending very solely on these labor unions. So the problem with labor unions is that it sets a standard parameter and these work regulations for workers, right? But then why is it bad? Because it also acts as a blanket policy, and because there are also good and bad workers, not all of them are similar. So the problem is when they standardize these minimum wages and these benefits for these labor workers, this minimum wages and these benefits and this medical care is just being a detrimental harm and upkeep towards these companies, because they have to spend more money on these labor workers, but then they are not generating money, and this is just not justifiable, because these labor workers which are good deserve more benefits, but then these bad workers also gets the same benefits which they don't deserve. This is why it's unjustified. not all labor workers deserve, because some do, some don't. It just makes the labor workers become more complacent. But then, what happens when we disband them? In our case, there will be no more generalization. This company judges these workers based on individual basis, right? We mean to say that these companies will judge them based on meritocracy. So then, with merits, it also accelerates the efficiency and workforce of this company as a whole. And then these labor workers will be more incentivized to work more productively and harder, because when the productivity increases, the quality of work increases, then the income of the company itself increases. And then on the second level, when these companies pay tax towards the government, when they have more income, they can pay more tax because the tax is proportional to the income. So the economic circulation will improve very greatly. So the crisis is solved as a whole. And then on the second level, companies throw away workers that and not just these workers are incentivized to work harder, but then these companies also get more profit for themselves because they don't have to pay for these bad workers who don't do the work at all. So when the more profit comes, these kinds of tax which they pay to the government will improve the circulation as a whole. But then on the second substantive, which we are going to tell you about the safety net of preventing companies from failing, on what happens if this case of our side of government is not run. Yes, anyone of you? No? Okay, yes.
Firstly, on your point, when you say you're going to disband these labor unions until the economic crisis is over, isn't it a big contradiction when these labor unions are already built to protect these people during those economic crises?
No, the problem with labor unions is they are protecting them the whole time. Meaning to say that during economic crisis, this is just a burden towards the company, because these labor unions, which are not, because they are not unions are just a burden, right? Because these companies are the one who pay these labor workers, not these labor unions, because the labor unions just negotiate with these labor workers. They act as some kind of lawyers to them, and this is why it's bad during economic crisis, because it is a very big burden. But then on the second substantive, what happens if this case is not run, right? When these companies with bad workers, which have generated higher amount of upkeep in this company, right? This company cannot generate that very much of an income when it can during an economic crisis, and then these labor unions protect these bad workers, which will make the case much more worse. And these companies cannot judge based on meritocracy. Meaning to say that when companies sell their products to the customers, when they sell their products at at a lower price, which means that people are going to buy it more often, and then more people are going to be interested to invest in this company's revenue. With this bad with these bad workers, all this income that these customers have generated will just go to these bad workers who don't deserve the income as well. But then without the bad workers, these companies don't have to pay for them. They can focus on more good workers, which means that it also benefits the company as a whole. But then why is it harmful when this case is not run on a cycle level? Because these bad workers are also complacent with the protection given by the labor union, right? Because they work less productively with more loss generated by these labor workers, which are bad, and they do not do very good workforce, and they are just complacent with the protection given by this labor union, so less profit are given. With that, I already told you our case setup, which we are going to disband labor unions until economic crises are over. Meaning to say that we are not just banning labor unions as a whole, we are just suspending them so that the economic crisis can be solved much more faster and much more efficient. And also on two substantives, to maintain good workers and protect these bad workers. With that, state government is very proud to propose in today's debate.
Thank you, Prime Minister. Let's have the leader of opposition to start the case from opposition side. Here,
Ladies and gentlemen, the problem with side government today is they come up with a very confusing objective in today's motion. Under the motion, this House would disband labor unions in economic crisis. Now let's look. I've already POI and asked you that, aren't these labor unions already created to protect these laborers in times, not just in, yes, also in all, we can see it is for during all times of economics, but especially during these economic crises, when during the times when these people are these laborers are at the dangers of are at the mercy of the discretion of these companies, ladies and gentlemen, where these companies can simply lay off these workers, when these companies can simply mark down their wages for no apparent reason, simply because the economy is in a crisis, ladies and gentlemen. We believe no, because these labor unions are done so, are created to protect the rights of these laborers, to protect these people who are the main workforce of these companies at the end of the day. These laborers are the 99%, ladies and gentlemen. These are the workforce that stimulate the economy at the end of the day. No, thank you, sit down. Now, carry on with what they said before. First, they said, another confusing thing, they said they will create an efficient workforce because they made this assumption that these good and bad workers economy or an optimum economy, bad workers are already laid off, they are fired already, because a company already practices a sense of meritocracy. That's why you see people getting fired if they lays off in their works, if they play Candy Crush during their work hours, ladies and gentlemen. That is why they say that supposedly in an economic crisis, every person, every laborer suddenly becomes a lazy person. We say no, that under these, but these labor unions do so because these workers still deserve the rights to be protected, to be laid off, to be under the mercy of these greedy corporations. Before that, you.
I've already told you, yes or no, that when we disband these labor unions, this incentivizes these workers to work even more productively.
Thank you. The first problem with this, when they say that they're going to incentivize workers to suddenly have more productivity, is that how are you going to increase productivity when there are less workers, ladies and gentlemen? When less workers are already in the corporation, you cannot that this is simply because of the reason that workers, the main force of how a corporation works is that they need their workers to work, ladies and gentlemen. They need more people to create that. Sit down, Tariq, and you to go. Now, lastly, what we talk about is that in a sense of how labor unions work, so it's because why do we say that these labor unions must exist? Because they protect the rights of these people. Why do these people need their rights to be protected? It's because when their rights are protected, then they have the incentive to work properly, because they know that even if there is an economic crisis, I know that I will still be protected. But that doesn't mean I should lays off, ladies and gentlemen. Because even in a normal economy, especially in an economical crisis, I know that my chances to be fired is that much higher. But I'm still thankful that these labor unions are still there to protect me at the end of the day. This is not a blanket policy, but rather of a mutual understanding between every person to know that even if they make mistakes once or twice, they will still be that the government still cares on how these labor unions are done, ladies and gentlemen. Right, why not?
If these labor unions protect these labor workers and incentivize them, then why are still bad workers at the end of the day?
Ladies and gentlemen, bad workers only exist because firstly, these corporations cast a blind eye on them. Secondly, it's because these lazy workers are usually the top dogs of these companies. That is why there are still lazy workers. But the lazy workers usually who are laborers, who are at the bottom class of these corporations, can be easily fired just like that because they are under the scrutiny of these corporations itself. This is why we believe a check and balance already exists in a normal economy. Now, moving on to the contextualization of how labor unions are created. Firstly, we believe that these labor unions protect these laborers, as I already told you before. Why do they protect these people? Because these people, these laborers, are the ones that are stimulating the economy. Not just that in a sense where they work for the company, but rather when they gain income from the company, they send back into the market. And how it justifies why we need to spend more in a recession, and therefore and so on and so on. Okay. Now moving on to how I say when these people they protect these rights of they protect the rights of the laborers. These laborers have this sense of safety where they believe that yes I will still work hard, but knowing that even if I fail, I will still have some sort of protection, which I already say a mutual understanding between all laborers
and also employers. Lastly, what we believe on this is that as a safety net, that these labor unions will still, that in a times of economic crisis, they will still rationalize a sense of the limiting of what rights they will ask for, of maybe reducing a few, of maybe reducing the minimum wage they ask for in times of economic crisis, because they do understand what's going on in the world today. They do understand what's going on in the market at the end of the day. Therefore, we believe that these labor unions will rationalize what they ask for from these employers at the sense of the day. Moving on to my substantive, where I talk about how it justifies that we should spend more money in a time spending, ladies and gentlemen. When it starts from inflation, where people spend too much, and suddenly a tipping point comes when nobody wants to spend anymore. Then it goes down into a recession when nobody wants to spend because people realize that at the end of the day. Now, what happens in this tipping point is that in between that there's an optimum economy, and where that optimum economy exists when people are spending and saving at the right pace. But in a recession, people are saving too much and they're not spending anything at all. In a normal economy, you must spend money back into the economy, because the cycle of money goes where when you spend money, it goes into the market, it goes up, and it goes down back where you work for the economy, where you work back for your company and the company pays you back. Therefore, the money you spend goes back to you in that sense. That's how the cycle of money works. Second level analysis is that during a recession, prices go down. And why do prices go down? Because demand goes down, because nobody wants to spend anymore. What happens is that in a recession, even governments want to encourage you to spend more, ladies and gentlemen. Governments create where banks reduce why so, ladies and gentlemen? Because we believe that when people spend money, the money goes back in the economy and it stimulates the economy. The economy can only be stimulated when money is flowing. The problem with government right now is they're not allowing this money to be flowed back into the economy. Therefore, the economy cannot be stimulated at the end of the day. We believe this becomes a justification on why more money or why money must be given to these people, and that's what these labor unions do. These labor unions come in and tell you that money must be given to these people, and that continuous flow of money must go on at the end of the day, so that the economy can be stimulated back into an optimum economy. I am proud to oppose this motion. Thank you very much.
Opposition, next Deputy Prime Minister.
I have to be straightforward in today's debate. Our claims points are just mutually exclusive under our points. We also want to avoid recession. We also want to generate better income. We also want to create better generation of economic circulation under our side. The problem with your side is that you're not proving the mechanical changes of how letting this labor union still exist will suddenly create this benefit that you're chasing for. Side of position, you fall. So let's move on with the rebuttals in today's debate, right? First question, should we protect the workers during this kind of economic crisis? Because they're trying to say that, oh, regardless of what kind of time, we should still protect the workers' importance, right? But here's a question that we need to ask you guys. Are you now agreeing to protect workers, although you have to spend a lot of revenue from these companies, because we're talking about minimum wages, we're talking about healthcare that takes a lot of the part of the revenue from the companies that needed to be spent upon these workers, and these workers doesn't only come in a small amount. There are millions and thousands of people, especially huge companies, right? Then therefore you actually have, and then therefore you have to spend up a lot of money to just cover up the welfare protection of these people, where we think it is harmful. You did not provide any answers for this question. We still think that you fail. Are we not reducing more productivity? Another question that they asked us. Because right now they think that we're not actually agreeing to support to reduce the work productivity by firing much more workers. Well, we're not actually supporting that idea, but we're just going to create a much more better regulatory system in which where we can check out people who are much more complacent easier. Because the problem with the existence of labor union inside status quo is that everyone is the same and everyone is working moderately and adequate enough just to get that kind of work pension that this companies give in the first place, right? But here's a problem in which in an economic crisis, we cannot let this happen, in which we need everyone to work better than they used to before. Then therefore, by removing these labor unions in the first place, we're incentivizing them to be less competent but much more productive than the minimum wage that we provided you before. With this kind of awareness that these workers have, that's why we're creating complacency less under our paradigm, much more under yours. But but the last one, right? How can recession happen, right? This is a thing that they actually didn't prove. But then let's move on to my arguments on how we're going to solve this problem much better. But before that, any defense that you want to price correct? Okay, so let's move to our first argument, right? On how, with our proposal, we're going to incentivize people to buy much more products. Because right now we have to analyze the problem that exists inside status quo, especially in a situation when there's an economic crisis. Because right now, wages or salary of people are going to be lower compared to the prices of products during this kind of economic crisis, right? Because companies have to generate a lot of revenue, and especially when they have to pay out like bailouts that government gives them, and also they have to pay back the revenue that they've already spent onto the protection of the welfare of these people, of the to say right now the prices go up and people also suffer, not only the workers of this industry but normal workers such as like in the middle class family. But therefore we tell you that there's another factor affecting these prices as well, in which to generate a lot of income to protect these workers' welfare, such as like minimum wages and also healthcare, then therefore it takes up huge expenses that the charge of products go higher. Now how do we solve this problem in times of economic crisis in which we want to avoid, right? We disband these labor unions, then therefore there's no more protection for these workers to be protected by any organizations. So how will companies do this? But why will companies? Because they're incentivized to protect the welfare. They're incentivized to protect their revenue in the first place, right? Because they want to pay back the loans that the government has already injected into them, and also it's very much more important that they will do it because they want to generate much more profit instead of prioritizing the workers' importance. And then therefore, huge expenses for labor workers will be relocated for profit generation. In order for economy to be better, people have to buy more much easily. Because right now, according to the Keynesian theory, for you to generate income and for you to make better circulation is where people can buy much more things easily. And therefore, this is very important because when people buy more easily, companies can generate income much more easily, and then money will go back to the government that has given bailouts to them much easily as well. But when the demand also increases, that's why they can actually create much more job opportunities as well, because they needed to create much more workforce. And that's in times of economic crisis. These kind of things are very important because like job opportunities are very important for those who are suffering for financial crisis, so that they can actually receive salaries as well during this kind of times, right? So all of the benefits can only happen if the prices are cheap. So by actually reducing this problem that these companies are suffering, which is like protecting the welfare protection of these labor workers, right? Then therefore these companies can make the prices that the prices of the products that workers in the first place, right? Who solves economic much more better and who solves recession? Us. But right now, we're moving on to my second argument on how it's going to ease company to bail bailouts easier. Because right now we have a problem during economic recession in which companies who receive continuous bailouts from government keeps on abusing this money that the government spends, not to use for generating income, but to use for actually protecting the labor workers that they have. For example, it's already happened in 2007. An insurance company inside America called the AIG received billions of bailouts for them to actually generate income so that they can actually make America a much more better place. But what did they do is that they abused the money that the government gave to them and actually used it to pay back the minimum wage for their workers, in which this actually is very detrimental because these bailouts are not to protect the workers in the first place. It's for them to generate the income much more and then therefore could generate the economy much better. Then therefore, we tell you when we actually disband these labor unions, we're solving this problem in which we incentivize people to not, we incentivize companies to not use these bailouts that we give to them to abuse it onto their workers, but to use it, to focus it onto actually generating much more income. Then therefore, this is very important because if continuous bailouts are given towards these companies, the taxes are also increased upon citizens. And when continuous bailouts are still given, it becomes a continuous situation of jeopardizing the citizens' financial state as well. We don't want this to happen. We don't want the citizens to pay much more tax. We want the companies to easily pay back the bailouts that has already been given to the government, and therefore we need to disband these labor unions, which are burdening the company in the first place, and open us an avenue of abuse for the bailouts that the government gives. So who solves economic recession at the end of the day? Us. Who protects civilians much more better besides than workers? Us. Who creates much more better work efficiency? Us. Who protects the economy? Us. Thank you.
and self-defeated opposition. Here.
Ladies and gentlemen, today from the government side, they have excluded themselves from morality. They simply want money. They simply want to give money to people. They don't think of the morality. They don't think of the workers themselves. They think by laying off workers, people will become incentivized. Ladies and gentlemen, they on the opposition side want to humanize the company rather than in times of these times they need humans, they need human needs. So why do we want to be more greedy? Why do we want to increase the revenue and so on and actually put more burden to the workers? Because workers are the main force. They don't need to be pressured by the economic crisis so much until they break down. Now, these gentlemen coming from the side government, they say that by increasing revenue and all because they get bailouts from the government and they have to give minimum wages so that they will no recession. But ladies and gentlemen, if you give minimum wages to the if you give minimum wages to the workers and the workers don't spend the money because they don't have enough money to spend, then what happens to the economy? The economy doesn't even goes to a higher level. They won't even increase because people don't spend money. Now, labor unions, sit down please. Now moving on to my first analysis, labor unions are needed because it needs to they need to fight for the workers. Ladies and gentlemen, the workers already have the right to have a certain amount of wage proportional to what they work for. For instance, I work 10 hours a day and then I get 1,000 a month. Is that fair, ladies and gentlemen? During the economic crisis, you get unproportional wages because the company themselves they don't want to pay you money. They have money themselves, but they don't want to pay you money because they want money for themselves. Now, this causes this, and I will explain more on my second point, which is welfare of the workers. Now, moving on to my second level of analysis, they are treated lesser than before because of economic recession. Because of a problem, they should support the workers. They should give the workers what they work for, rather than just firing off workers that cannot work anymore. They should actually support. They should give morality in times of this time to increase economy, rather than just destroying everybody, laying off workers, rather than reducing their wages. Sit down, please. Now moving on to my second point, which is welfare of the workers. Ladies and gentlemen, there is not enough wages for the workers to support their family. They don't have enough wages to pay for the food, for the comforts, for any other needs that the family needs. And what happens is, of need, workers should get more support from the company. For instance, I have sons. I have 7 sons, and all 6 of them are in a boarding school, say in SAS. But the problem lies when if they are in SAS, they need money. I mean, SAS is a very, very expensive school. It's a very elite school. So they need money, and I work only a normal salary man. I have minimum wages. In these times of need, I need money from the corporation. What should I do? Should I just ask my 6 sons to bail out of SAS? Is it the right thing to do? Because I need to proportionally give
money to my sons, like the government should give proportionally wages because of me.
On that point. Last point.
Sit down, please. Now because of this, the proficiency of the workers would I don't have enough money to even pay for my children's education. Now that's wrong, ladies and gentlemen, because if you don't have morality to work, there's no progress in work. You don't have the needs to work actually. And when this happens, this middle class workers, the main forces would seriously not work at all. They won't be the working force they were before, because there is no support from the companies, because the company laying off them, the company is paying the minimum wages. Down, please. Now we on the opposition side wants people to get what they want. Because of that, we justify labor unions because they are the main gateway, the catalyst for the company and the workers. Now what have I told you today? I told you today that side government of the company and not think of the workers themselves. And I've told you that they disregard morality in times where morality are more needed. And I've told you that workers under pressure cannot do much. And we from side opposition said that there is a need for labor unions because labor unions can fight for the right of the workers. Sit down, please. And labor unions can help the laborers, the main forces, which are the big spender that can increase the cycle of money so that the economy can rise. The labor unions can take care of the welfare of the workers because workers aren't given enough wages on these times of need, and it will decrease the proficiency of the worker, and likewise will decrease the economy itself. With that, I rest.
Thank you, leader opposition. Let's Governor Bick.
Yeah.
First, as a response to the second opposition's question over there, yes, you should take your son out of SAS. Why? Because it's run on meritocracy. But other than RMC, which runs on the labor union that wants to save everyone these labor unions properly. But that's more of our ad hominem, right, Mr. Speaker. On to the first issue of today, which is as a whole, right? Will work efficiency be better under our model? Since that's the benefit we told you will happen. But their only response to this was that meritocracy and work efficiency is already apparent under status quo. Meaning to say that if we prove that work efficiency is better under our model than status quo, then this rebuttal from them already falls in the first place. How is it creating work efficiency much more better? We tell you that these, especially these labor unions, are creating this form of blanket policy. How? Because they generalize and standardize these workers and give advantages and benefits towards these workers based on a very general judgment. This means that, for example, there are 50 workers and not all 50 workers are that similar in this certain sense. But because of these labor unions, they all get the same benefits even though they might not deserve it. Because you see, the problem with this is that it's not proportionate. They don't really get what they deserve. Things like more. This is why we think it's bad. But also, how is it without labor unions? This is how it's better under our paradigm, right? Because now companies can judge workers based on an individual basis and implement full meritocracy. whereby they can run on maximum work efficiency, especially in times of economical crisis, where they can throw away the bad workers and keep the good ones. How is this different than the paradigm under status quo? Well, we think that we can create much more better work efficiency under our paradigm is because now it's under a paradigm of economical crisis. So if an economical crisis happens, it changes the standards and judgment levels of a company. Because in status quo, a company might still want to keep some of these moderate working workers who still do quite a good job and still want to keep these people. But now, in an economical crisis, you want to run on full efficiency, meaning to say that even moderate workers are going to be fired and thrown away. So what does this mean? This means that they are going to make these as status quo, Ma'am Chair. We concede to the fact that meritocracy does exist, but it's going to happen much more better under our paradigm. And the benefits of this, firstly, creates much more better work efficiency, whereby the bad workers will be good and the good workers will be much more better. This is how the company can improve its profit making, and this is how it can give back to the state and run the economic cycle. But the second benefit of our paradigm, something they didn't even clash with, was that now company doesn't even have to pay for these workers. They don't have to pay for the minimum wage of these bad workers. They don't have to give medical health care to those who don't even deserve it in the first place. So because of this is how they generate much more income. This is how it completes the economical cycle and makes the economy flourish much more. We think that side RMC over there have been just way too caring towards these workers. They want to save workers who aren't even good in the first place. We tell you that we're still saving workers under our paradigm, but if you're just that bad, then you should be thrown out. So will work efficiency be better under our model? Yes, Mr. Speaker, we tell you it will. Meritocracy is already in status quo, then his speech is already wasted. But also, onto the second issue of today, should we protect workers in the first place? Side opposition have gave us a hard stance, yes, you should. But we coming from side government tell you, yes, we should protect workers, but not if it comes at the expense of the country's economy in the first place. First response, they never even stated the importance of helping these workers in the first place. But secondly, we tell you we are making them work much more better, making the work environment much more competitive and conducive in this certain sense. Then therefore, yes, we are saving these workers. But you can't just spoon feed them, Mr. Speaker, to make them better. You have to give them a hard life sentence. But also, we tell you, even if we're harming the workers under our paradigm, then it's for a utilitarian benefit. We're not harming them, but even if it is, it comes at the expense of a utilitarian benefit of saving not only the company's profit generation status, but also saves the company from this current economical crisis. Want to protect workers so much, what's the harms of that? This is a flip side of the first argument, Mr. Speaker. If companies, in times of economical crisis, was to still maintain these labor unions, meaning to say they still want to maintain these moderate and bad workers, meaning to say they'll have to pay 2 workers, when in actuality they can pay for the price of 1 worker that can cover these 2 jobs. What does this mean? This means that these companies will be victimized to a certain extent, something opposition wants to do, and therefore is hampering the profit-making rights of these companies. If you want to throw away these workers, these bad workers which you don't think that you need in your company, then yes, you should have the right to do so. So under their paradigm, it's victimizing these companies and hampering their profit making. And the harms of hampering their profit making is that the government doesn't get the company's tax in return, not to a huge extent, and they are hampering the economy. Economical crisis, much more worse under their paradigm. But even if harms are happening, we tell you it's justified for utilitarian benefit. Thus, we tell you, yes, we should protect workers, but not if it comes at the expense of the. Okay, no. So moving on to the third issue, which is who is increasing spending much more better. Since Aklif's speech was wholly telling us about why spending is so good, well, we concede to that. Spending is good. But we tell you we can make it spending much more better under our paradigm. How? We tell you we can increase spending because now, under our paradigm, when you take away labor unions, companies will make prices lower. Why? 2 reasons to this. Because the first reason why they will make the prices lower, because initially under status quo, when there was no economical crisis, and when there was a labor union, the price is high because they know that they will have to make enough profit to also cover up for the minimum wage of these workers and cover up the welfare of these workers. So now, when there's no labor unions, they can run meritocracy fully and therefore making a less wage for these workers, and they can lower the prices. Following the principle of supply and demand, when they spend less on the model, which is the workers in this certain sense, then they will also make the prices less, because the profit they need to make in the first place will also become were too high in the first place, then people won't buy it, especially in this time of economical crisis, when they are fully aware that nobody has that much money in this certain extent. So when we make the prices much more less, then the companies will make the prices much more less, because they know if it's at the initial price, then no one will be able to buy it, therefore they won't be able to make profit. So without labor unions, we tell you it does increase spending much more better. So onto the final issue, who saves the economy? Like, who saves the economy much more better? We tell you, you run a full meritocracy, you shouldn't save workers who don't deserve to be saved in the first place. And we create work efficiency, we also increase spending. This is how SAS wins in an economical debate, but also this is why SAS is going to the semi-finals.
Thank you, Dr. Bick speaker. Let's have the opposite speaker here.
Side government is just being selfish in today's debate, right? Because they're just prioritizing their profits over the workers' needs and the workers' rights. Now, they came up with an alternative. They came up with an alternative that came pretty late in the second speaker and the third speaker's speech, right? But we still accept that. They said that they're going to drop these prices to, in fact, where companies would drop their prices, and that would ask you on, even if you drop these prices, right, how are people going to spend if they don't have that money? Even if prices are cheap, even if prices are low, and people don't have money, they still can't spend and they still can't save the economy, where nobody will spend in the first place, and the recession will carry on for a longer period. Now, other mistakes coming out from side government is how they only care about their profit and they're disregarding morality in an economic crisis, right? They're only thinking about how they could profit from this economic crisis and then disregarding their morality, and they're not caring about their workers, about the majority, about the 99% of people that are in their company. Sit down. And that's why workers hate them so much. That's why workers hate people like SAS if they become bosses of companies, because they just want to save their own asses and they don't care about the workers. That's why workers think, I work like shit and all you give me is nothing, right? All I get in the end is nothing. Please sit down. Now, in their paradigm, right, they're giving people less money. So how is disbanding these labor unions and giving these employees less money to spend in the economy, in the market, actually helps to raise the economy in a certain country? And it's giving people less money, incentivizing them to buy more products. That's what we've been asking on our side government in the first place, right? Now, on how the cycle of money works, right, my first issue today is that money has to flow in, especially in an economic crisis, and that's why we say that these labor unions are very important, because they continue this flow of money to give it to these laborers. To give it to these laborers, so they actually can spend. Or what side government is doing, they're actually putting a barrier into that money into the laborers, so that people can't spend and they're not really saving the economy. And that's why side opposition is actually trying to save the economy, because we're actually giving more money to people don't spend, right? Now, on the fact that on the employees and the employers or the work efficiency, they've been telling you on how under their paradigm they will actually increase the work efficiency, but we don't think so, because how are people getting more incentives to work when you're giving them less money? We think that if you give them more money in the first place, they have more incentives to work. Because let's face it, human response to incentives, right? Especially incentives in the point of money and healthcare. Come on, bro.
Okay, so first thing, our paradigm is not going to reduce salary to the point where you can't even buy a burger. You can also get a high salary if you actually work hard enough. Now, what's the problem there?
Yes, now they've been saying that on their blanket policy where every labor worker is the same, where they assume that suddenly when these labor unions are there, then the bad workers and the good workers will get everything in common, right? But we say in a normal economy, in inflation, in a recession, there is we see there are different level of workers in a company, like how people are chiefs, like how people are lower the lower levels, and how the janitors and people clean toilets. But we see that we should actually, we're not trying to give the same income to all of them. We're actually trying to protect the rights. We just protect the rights of all of them. But the income of these people would be different. It would be different in the end. On how they're saying that. Okay, because if these labor unions are made, there are some people who get more money, and there are still some people who get less money based on performance of work. Now, have my deputy told you that even in a normal economy or even in a recession, there are workers that get more money than other workers, and that's a normal thing in a corporation setup. Now, because these corporations rely on their employees, that's why it's so important for them to protect these employees, to protect what they feel is how they're implying where they should just drop all these bad workers for them, right? But we tell you that jobless people can't spend their money. So what they actually try to do is create more jobless people and more people that don't have jobs, so that, but actually they're just trying to, they're not trying to save the economy, but they're just trying to make it worse. Sit down. Now, what we should do in recession, what are the actions to be taken in recession, like how my speakers have told you, that we should spend more, and banks will encourage spending more in economical crisis. Banks will actually give you a longer, actually reduce their safe. I mean, like, they have a safe for banks. They actually reduce their reserves in their banks. So what they actually try to do is give more money out in the market, and that's why we think side government is actually contradicting to the fact that even when banks reduce their reserves in their bank reserves because they want more money to flow in the market, while side government is trying to sit down. Now, when there's more money in the market, when people spend more, the economy goes up, and that's why on side opposition, we think that these labor unions are so important because they protect these rights of They protect these rights of these workers, and they actually, like in healthcare and in minimum wage, we put that minimum wage there, but it's up to the companies to pay on how much these workers are performing, how much these employees are performing. So we believe that it's in the company's rationalization to actually know how much to pay these workers, these good workers, these high performance workers, and actually know how much and the level of minimum wage to these moderate or bad workers, right? And this is why side opposition is trying to save the economy, and side government are just trying to save their asses. Thank you.
Speaker, let's have the opportunity. Hi, speaker.
Look at me. I'm just a soldier. I work my ass off every day. Suddenly, I go to my bosses at SAS, and they tell me they can't give me any money because they gotta wipe their butts with gold leaf-plated toilet paper, ladies and gentlemen. Now, the problem is today, on-site SAS today, on-site government, is they come up and tell you that where they are a company, supposedly because of an economical crisis, because supposedly they don't have much money to give out, therefore they're going to disregard morality in times of economic crisis. They're just going to say, oh, I don't care about these underperforming workers, whereas they don't care. They are humans. We from side opposition come here and tell we're all human beings, that even though we do underperform sometimes, even though we do make some mistakes, we still deserve these kinds of protection. My reply speech. Firstly, I'll break down all the points coming up from side government so they can wipe their own asses someday later, and I will tell you how side opposition wins this case. Firstly, they talk about an assumption on how their incentives create a better productivity, where they say they're going to lay off bad workers and they're going to lay off underperforming workers as a form of incentive. We believe that these are forms of incentives. Rather, we've already told you that these are more forms of a threat to these workers, saying that if they don't perform better than other workers, therefore they'll be laid off at the end of the day. This is a very immoral concept coming from side government at the end of the day, where we come to you and tell you that worker rights are the utmost important today, because they are human beings. They work so hard, they work as hard as they could, and yet they're still laid off. They're still being fired. Their salaries are still being cut. Why? Because just because another person can work better than them, ladies and gentlemen. This is where it comes up from side government's points for today. Secondly, we've already told you from my third speaker itself how they come up with an gentlemen. But we've already told you through their paradigm itself, they are laying off workers, they are firing workers, and they're cutting off their salaries. These workers, these 99% who generate the economy, who stimulate the economy, and who are the main spenders in the economy, cannot spend anymore, ladies and gentlemen. Why? Because they have no money. Why? Because SAS does not want to give them money anymore, ladies and gentlemen. They want to cut them off. They want to lay it off. We believe, I already told you in my speech, how we've already justified in an economic crisis where people need to spend. Even the government itself already tells banks to give out money to people so that more money can flow. And that's what these labor unions do. They allow this money to keep on flowing into the economy, keep on flowing in the market, so that that cycle of money continues and so that the economy can be stimulated. What side government does is that they cut it off simply because they want to protect themselves, simply because they don't generate enough profit, ladies and gentlemen. That's the problem of today's case, where most of that profit goes to the CEOs, where most of that profit about lazy workers, ladies and gentlemen. The lazy workers, have I already told you, the only reason why a bad worker in normal economies, meritocracy is already done, ladies and gentlemen, where the bad workers are already laid off in the first place, and these laborers who are at the bottommost hierarchy of them are already laid off in normal economies. Therefore, they already have an incentive to work properly, especially in an economic crisis. But even if they say that side government comes in, that meritocracy is better, their meritocracy is more of a Darwinian policy, where they say that even if you work hard, if another person works better than you, then we'll lay you off at the end of the day. And then what they become is an inhuman corporation, a machine that only wants to generate profit at the end of the day, where SAS can come up and tell you that, oh, because I want profit for myself at the end of the day. We from side RMC tell you that we're trying to work for everyone. We're here to serve you, ladies and gentlemen, and that I take my seat. Thank you very much.
You have to reply, speaker.
Okay. How our proposal will work is already clear in today's debate. Since SAS is based on meritocracy, in which we don't receive 100 ringgit a month, such as at RMC, obviously, when we're better than them, obviously our system will work better. But that's just me of being prominent as well. Let's move on with the technical qualities coming from RMC, right? First of all, they didn't rebut any of our arguments. They just ignored it and just carried on with the idea of, oh, it isn't immoral. So we think that that's also something that I'll rebut later. But first of all, they're also being myopic and also omniscient in today's debate, in which they think that they can actually solve this problem by actually using labor union without even telling us the mechanical changes in when the companies have to generate more revenue, but then they can't generate revenue because they have to spend a lot onto these workers, illogical. But also, right, we think that you're abandoning the unsettled burden Akif brought up throughout all three speakers as well, because Akif suddenly wanted to prove to us how these labor unions could solve this, but all throughout these three speakers, they didn't even prove any proof of how this could be done. So we think that your counter proposal fails with today's debate. But then let's move on to the first issue. Who has the higher moral high ground in today's debate, right? Because coming from side opposition, they said that wages have to be proportional because now they can pay back for their sons in SAS. Because right now, and that's the moral thing to do, because we don't want to be selfish. But coming from side government, we already made it clear, we're not being selfish here. we're actually allowing these workers to still have an adequate or even a higher salary as long as you're not complacent, as long as you're working much more harder. But then, who's being selfish in this situation? Obviously, you guys, because you gain adequate salary as those who are working their asses off, although there are a lot of people's financial state are actually jeopardized, especially in an economy crisis. You guys are selfish, so who has a moral high ground? Definitely not you guys. So second issue on who allows people to spend more, right? Coming from side opposition, they say that, oh, when people get minimum wage, then they can spend more in an economic crisis, because in an economic crisis, they need a lot of money. Well, we tell you that's cow down. Because why? Because it's not enough in the first place. In an economic crisis, the prices go up detrimentally, and to the extent where even though these workers have minimum wages, it's not adequate enough. Meaning to say that, especially in situations where companies who need to cover up the expenses that they've already spent upon these people, who their welfare needs to be protected, although they are lazy fucking ass workers, are going to jeopardize the situation here, right? And then therefore we tell you, this we need to take away these huge expenses being spent by the company, and therefore it benefits workers as well at the end of the day, because when the prices go low, the cost of living for these workers also go low. So therefore we're not actually segregating the workers' rights, we're also making the workers' life much more easier. But if you want a higher salary, work your ass off. So who solved the problem in today's debate? We solved the problem because under your side, you're supporting complacency, and you're also supporting the expenses of the revenue of this company upon these people who doesn't even deserve it. Although it is clear that it's not our responsibility to cater to the fault of yours, especially when others are suffering from poverty. With that, SAS is going to semi-finals.
MOPs, we now cross the floor and everyone else is also requested to leave the